Welcome to Our Journey to Equity, a podcast all about turning passion into tangible impact, alchemizing the shared desire for equity into actions and engaging conversations that expose health and social injustices and empower us with the tools and information we need to protect our right to live healthy lives. Together, we'll explore the power of community voices in achieving health equity for people of color. It's time to make a difference. Together, we can create a future where health equity is a reality for all. Join Tamara and her guests on Our Journey to Equity.
Hello, friends, family, and colleagues. Welcome back to another episode of Our Journey to Equity. I'm Tamara Smith. I'm a healthcare executive and a health equity practitioner, and I am on a journey to see how we can leverage community voice and all of the health equity practitioners and subject matter experts out there working in social justice to help inform how we can create and educate others on health equity and really make this a reality that we all experience. Each month, I am joined by a fellow health equity practitioner, and we just explore their journey together to help us really become educated on ways that we can help educate others. We can leverage this as a way to outreach to others and to advocate for others and to be strengthened, honestly, by others' journey along their own paths as well. I am so excited this month to have a very special guest with us today. This person has been with me along my journey for at least the past 15 years and has been a part of many of my own ups and downs. Our guest today is a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a licensed addiction specialist, and is also the one that has my heart, my husband, Cassiel Smith. Welcome.
Thank you, baby. It's good to be here. Definitely good to be a part of this show.
Well, I'm so excited for the people to hear about you and your journey and the work that you're doing in the mental health field, especially for people of color, for men of color. But before we jump in there, we always make sure that we journey together. And so I always start off with just a short little snippet about my own journey and what brought me to this point before we dive into your journey. So for many of you that have been following for some time, you may know some of this already. But what brought me to this point is I actually just was raised with a heightened level of awareness of the differences in health outcomes between Black and brown communities and white communities because I grew up in very white spaces. I grew up in a middle class neighborhood in Northeast Atlanta in the suburbs. And so oftentimes I was the only Black or brown spot in the classroom. And the experiences that many of my peers had were from a healthcare perspective and their families were just so different from many of my own experiences. So for example, I remember going to church once with a friend in middle school, and it was my first time at a white church. And for many of you that have been in a Black church before, you know our church services are very expressive. They are very long. You are going to be in there all day, but after church, we are going to eat. We are going to throw down, okay? And so that was my experience. And then going to church with this individual, we were out and it was still morning, I think that enough said, right? So, for me, and then also after that experience, when we went home to eat after church, the dinner was a very light, healthy tomato soup and salad. And I was like, okay, this is different, right? So obviously there are cultural things that I began to grow up with an awareness of that were very different. But on that, so, just thinking about the notion of food and how much that is a part of our culture and the Black community. I remember being at family gatherings, cookouts, holidays, things like that, and just loading my plate up because that's what we do. And I would have aunts and cousins come up to me and almost issue a warning, like, okay, be careful because you're going to be big like us one day. And diabetes runs in this family, things like that. And so it just wasn't an experience that my white counterparts were having. And so that is where I believe I became so much more heightened in my awareness about these issues. And it's really what I carried with me, sort of in this determined mindset to figure out how this did not have to become a reality, because I just really believed innately that just because we were Black, it did not mean that we had to have a legacy of sickness as a part of our family. And so that's really what led me into the field. And of course, I've uncovered, yes, there are cultural things that may contribute, but there are also a lot of inequities that happen from just implicit bias in the way that others are treating Black and brown individuals, and from a lens of discrimination and from a lens of access to care. And some of these discriminatory practices, go back very, far back in our history as far as redlining goes and how communities were invested in. And so that's why some communities are food deserts and there's not access to healthy foods, which makes it near impossible for you to be able to eat a healthy diet, right? And of course, it's no surprise to anyone that most of the individuals in these communities are people of color. And so that is a small snippet of what sort of led me on this lifelong journey to explore how we can really dismantle all of the racist practices that have led to what we are seeing today as far as, a lower quality of life and health outcomes for many communities of color, and how we partner to do this work. One of the things I find really interesting is that the way that we think about healthcare in the United States is often just the physical body. And it really doesn't even include your eyes or your teeth, because dental and vision care are also treated separately outside of the traditional healthcare system. But one of the things that we're hearing about more and more is the importance of acknowledging our mental health, and the importance of really recognizing ourselves as not being separate from our minds. And so I'm so excited to hear about the journey that Cassiel has been through to found Well Theology Counseling Center. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we get there, I would love to hear and for you to share with the audience a little bit about your journey. What brought you to being a licensed clinical mental health counselor?
Yeah, definitely. But before we do that, you're my lovely wife, and I'm just sitting here admiring your beauty. You talk about your journey and just the aura that is coming from you. So I just want to give you a little bit of kudos right here.
Thank you.
You're very special, and that's part of my mental health, just being connected to you, just seeing you grow, and what you do for my family,
thank you.
For our family. Mm-hmm. So wanted to say that. So that's a very good question. So, what led to my journey towards mental health in this field? So there's a number of things, and I know we talk quite often, so just bringing the viewers into this, there have been a number of reasons why I chose this field, really why the field chose me. I grew up in a household, you alluded to just the family. I grew up in a household where most of us, like many households, mental health wasn't a conversation that you talked about at the table. It wasn't a conversation that you brought into the space in the home in general. But what was a conversation was the aftermath of the effects of mental health that we experienced, that as a child, you weren't privy to that information. You just knew that so-and-so was in a hospital, or so-and-so is isolated in his room or her room, or, so-and-so is just that way. Yeah. And so you never really knew the story of why so-and-so was that way. And so as you get older and you experience life on your own, and you realize wow, there's some things that I'm experiencing like so-and-so. And you begin to go through this journey, and you're starting to figure out yourself, and also you're starting to figure out your environment. And I know personally for me, I was experiencing things as early as high school that didn't really have the language for, but I knew that there was periods in time when I would be out socializing with my friends, that I just felt more inward, that I felt more isolated, or I felt more disconnected.
And did you talk to anybody about it at the time, or you just thought that this was normal behavior?
I didn't talk. I just thought it was somewhat normal. And no, I didn't talk to anybody. I just kind of just kept it moving. Played sports, and so there were some things around being an athlete that were my outlets. For us growing up, we were always outside, and so I had that space where I was just able to do things that were, beneficial and like hobbies for myself. So I would say that helped me along the way. But then when it translated to college and also playing sports in college, you know, things were a little bit more intense. The stress level was higher, and you start to recognize that some of these problems that you experienced before, it was a little bit more challenging to deal with. And so even though for me, I still was one of those individuals that I just try to push on through or just try to navigate the waters on my own.
Where do you think that came from? Just that desire to just push through?
I think it came from a fear of not wanting others to perceive you in a particular way. Because with those conversations that were not conversations in the household about, you know, said individuals and what they're going through, we also made up our own conclusions. And we would say so-and-so was crazy, or so-and-so is weird, or so-and-so is this. And so you create this image in your mind that this symptom or this behavior is crazy.
So you stigmatize it.
I personally stigmatized it.
Right.
And made joke of it. And because of that, it kind of boxed me in as I got older. And it was one of those things that I personally didn't want to be put in that category of how I put others in categories. And so it just repeated a cycle like many of us go through because of the fear that we have related to admitting that there might be something going on. And so that was part of my journey. And then it wasn't until really when I really started trying to tackle this was when we were courting and about to get married. And I remember having a panic attack before going to work. So prior to this, I already experienced depression, anxiety, but I wasn't getting any help for it. But then when the stress level rose, about to get married, a lot of transition. Not
stressed out because of me,
No, by no means, by no means. I was excited, but it's one of those things that stress is stress. And when there's a lot of buildup, a lot of different things happening around you, your body is trying to find a way to fight it and expel and find relief. But at that point for me, everything kind of came crashing down, what it seemed like came crashing down. And I remember having this panic attack and then getting close to work and having to call my boss and say, I just can't come in.
Had that ever happened to you before?
That was my first one.
Okay.
Felt like I was having a heart attack. It felt like my body was shaking, racing thoughts. Just felt like I was going crazy, which didn't help the stigma that I already put on myself. And so I came back, I ended up taking off for a week, and I remember approaching you, and I remember having to cry in front of your face because I could not control my tears because part of the symptoms that I was experiencing was, you know, uncontrollable crying. And it was a very vulnerable moment. And it was a very, even though it was a vulnerable moment, I'm glad it happened because it was one of those earlier kind of relational journeys that couples go through where you are able to show yourself to your couple. And once that wall is let down, you know, you can kind of proceed through. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, but it was very scary. So I had two of those in my life, and both times were very scary.
There's so much there. So one, when you were coming up in your family and there were issues, symptoms like this that were discussed about other people, because the context, the broader context of mental health as something that can be treated, and that is actually something that most, if not all people experience, it actually created a stigma. It's like the lack of discussion allowed you to come away with creating your own ideas and beliefs about something, and that in turn actually was a stigma for you. So then in experiencing certain symptoms, you actually go throughout your life in a sense, sort of afraid of what you're experiencing because of the lie, you know, the misconception that you've created for yourself. And that only, what I heard you say is that only built, right? So that just created a buildup. So you don't have a space in your family where this is discussed as something that can and should be discussed, which I think is very common, very
Right.
typical in Black families specifically,
Yep.
in the Black community. And there's a lot of reasons why. We can talk about that. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. But then also as an adult, you know, when you do begin to have these moments where the pressure mounts, it also leaves you without any tools in your toolkit to understand how to process. And so kind of like a volcano,
Yep.
it just boils over.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. I mean, you know, there were certain tools that luckily for me, there were certain tools that I did have that were not being applied directly related to my symptoms, but subsequently it ended up being a tool for me. One of the tools, you know, growing up in a household where faith was important, going to church, even though obviously for me, you know, my story wasn't fully invested into the church in terms of like making sure that my life was living my lifestyle. Yes. I was still young, you know, like many of us, still young, just trying to explore life and things like that. But the seeds, the foundation was there. And so when there were tough times, because tough times were many, I would pray. I will call on the Lord. I was crying out to the Lord. And that helped me. And then as my life transitioned in college, I was blessed to get saved, to dedicate my life to Christ my junior year in college. And that was that was medication for me during that time period. That was a great coping skill, coping tools, medication, resource that I had at that time. But it wasn't always like that, you know? And so there were certain things that along the way helped me get more stability. But the thing is with mental health, depending on the mental health disorder that you are faced with, a lot of those symptoms are progressive. You know, so you might start off where it might be a mild case of depression or a mild case of anxiety. And even though you have all the tools and you're doing the right things, sometimes it just continues to progress. Sure. And for me, it just progressed despite having all of those coping skills. And so my journey through my mental health, mental wellness, took on many different forms.
Yeah. So let me just clarify something that you said. So while you were in college, you had this moment, this sort of spiritual experience where you used that as a form of therapy or as a way to sort of air quote medicate yourself, right? Through these early stages of some of the mental health symptoms that you were experiencing. You weren't necessarily taking medication at the time. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that for the audience. So religion in itself is not something that's considered a medication, but it is a coping mechanism. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, by definition, it's not a form of medication that you take naturally. Things that individuals can do in order to help their mental health. And it varies across the board. One thing I would say that those coping things need to be positive.
Right.
All right. Because the thing is, when you don't have the means to cope naturally, or it wasn't discussed in your household, so those tools weren't developed at an earlier age, people tend to do what comes natural to them or what provided relief at some point. And so at some point, other things that are not positive could provide a support, but doesn't mean that long term, even in the short term, that is positive. So it's important that you get positive coping skills.
That's good. Yeah, definitely. So, okay, let's continue on this journey. So you mentioned that a lot of times mental health issues can become progressive if they're not being treated and professionally or in ways that are necessary, just depending on the condition. And you had some tools. Religion was really important for you. But then as things mounted and grew and the stresses of life continued to increase as they do, you found yourself in a position the first time of your life having like a very serious panic attack. And you know, one of the things that I remember from that period of time is wanting to create space for it. There was nothing about that for me, from my experience with it, that I felt like, oh my gosh, you know, this is crazy, like what is happening right now. If anything, I actually felt like, you know, this person that I love needs space. You know, this person that I love needs to feel safe. They need to know that they're covered. And I think that that's so important, because sometimes the thing that keeps you from wanting to share is fear of what this other person is going to think. Fear that there won't be space created for it, because you've created a stigma in your own mind that like this person is going to think I'm crazy, right?
Right.
So along your journey, as you've now come to this place where it's, you know, sort of progressed, take us back to that time and talk to us a little bit about how you managed through that time period.
Yeah, you know, you talked about it, like that was very important to know that you created a safe place for me, because that was the number one thing that was bothering me, thinking that she's gonna think I'm crazy. This was before we got married, so you had every right to, you know, pull out and not move forward with it. And so that was the fear that, you know, you're gonna think that, okay, I'm a liability, you know. And so when you created that space for me, that was that just set the tone for me, and that was what I needed, because that was a fear. I didn't really know what I needed either at that time. You know, the thing is, when you deal with certain symptoms, there's confusion that goes on. And so racing thoughts, and there's just confusion, and you don't know what the experience is all about anyway. And so everything is fresh. And so all that you do know is what you're feeling. And then you project the future, and you think that if I'm feeling this now, then my future is going to look crazy, or my future is going to look this. And so there's a lot of confusion going on. And so just having somebody there that creates an environment that allows that person to just settle in and figure out what they need is very important. And you allowed me to do that. And so, you know, that's what I needed at that particular time. The journey for me, you know, I was one of those individuals that I was very intentional about wanting to make sure that I overcame this. You know, having a foundation in the Word, I knew that, you know, greater is He that is in me than he that is in this world. And I could do all things through Christ Jesus that gives me strength. And those scriptures were very pivotal in, you know, creating a belief system that was empowered, creating a belief system that was confident, and knowing that my future was not what it was going to be, like what it looked like in that current moment. And so I was intentional about like being intentional about my mental health. The friends that I had around me was intentional. I believed that there was things that I lacked, and that the friends that were around me were all that helped create this journey in me that worked towards being that, like a version of that, because I felt like I had it in me. Also, you know, I did work on slowly trying to communicate my concerns to others as my concerns progressed, as my symptoms progressed. And I remember communicating my symptoms to somebody and what I was going through to one of my closest friends at the time. And I remember that I said, hey, you know, I deal with depression, I deal with anxiety, and I've been going through this for a while, and this and that. And he didn't really have the capacity in him to handle that. You know, he gave me a spiritual response, and I didn't feel the connection of what I guess I was looking for. Right. But what I did do was just recognize that some people do have that capacity for your journey, and some people don't, and it's not a bad thing. And so I would tell anybody, like, it doesn't make them less of a friend. It just means that there's certain people that are placed to help you in certain parts of your journey. And for him, that wasn't that part of the journey that he was helping me on.
That's good.
Yeah, but for me, my journey consisted of a number of different things. It got to a point though where I needed to consider the option of medication. And I know I ran from that discussion, that thought for a very long time because of the stigma. And again, the stigma that I placed on mental health, but also the stigma that I place on individuals that take medication. It was one of those things that I thought that it admitted that you have a problem. It also was it was something that I thought that if I take medication, it has the potential to make me more crazy. Again, I don't like to say crazy when I'm talking about mental health today, but that was the belief system that I had. And so it was one of those things that I wrestled with for a number of years. It got to a point where it became very unmanageable. A lot of extra crying spells, just inward emotional turmoil going on. And I was functioning in the helping service. I was helping others. I was doing case management. I was in the field. And I had good coping skills. You know, I would say I was a modeled person dealing with mental health, you know, but it just was one of those things that despite those tools that I had and the resources, it was progressive. And so I remember it's been about 10, 12 years now that I've been taking medication for my mental health. And one thing I would say about it is that it wasn't what I perceived it to be. It was explained to me by somebody, and I'm glad that they explained it this way, but your body produces a certain amount of serotonin in your body. There's the endorphins that are produced and things like that your body produces. The serotonin level for me was very low. Those are the pleasure, you know, the happy, you know, the things that make you feel excited and things like that. For me, mine was very low. Naturally, I was not going to be able to pull this together.
That's right.
You know, because there was some chemical stuff going on that just prohibited me from getting to that place. And so when I looked at it from that perspective, and when it was explained to me that medication acts as a booster or a refiller that actually allows you to meet the number that your body should have so that you can feel balanced, feel normal. When it was explained to me that way, it just made perfect sense. Like, I need to help my body. Being a former athlete, somewhat athlete now, I knew the power of taking protein. You know, I knew the power of putting protein back in your body when you're working out so that you can maintain, develop your muscles and things like that. And so if I can do it for that, when I know that it will help produce muscles, because my body is not going to produce a certain amount and you have to get it either by food or protein, what's the difference with medication?
Exactly.
Right? So when you start putting two and two together, you have to come up with a conclusion that that is something like that for me.
Let's unpack some of that. I think there's so much that you said there. So along your journey, you started putting certain things in place, right? The first thing I heard you really talk about that you put in place were the skills, the coping skills and the tools that you needed to be doing yourself. So that was first and foremost. You had sort of this determination, right? That I'm going to do the things that I need to do for my mental health. So much like anybody that decides, you know what, I need to be at a healthy weight. I am going to do the things that I need to do, right? I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat healthy. It's no different. You really use probably that disciplined mindset you got from being an athlete your whole life, right? Into, okay, I'm going to do these things for my mental health. The other thing I heard you mention was really being careful about the company that you kept around you.
That's important.
So the people around you, the environment, making sure that you have a supportive wife that is going to create space and capacity for you to walk through this journey.
Definitely.
But also the right friends, and also recognizing that when you have somebody that you share something like this with that may not have the capacity for it, you put them in the right place, right? Not to say that they're not a good person or a good friend, but they may not have the capacity for what you needed at that time. So the tools, the people that you kept around you, but then also coming to a realization that when all of those things are done and you are checking all the boxes and doing all the things that everyone says you need to be doing, at the end of the day, this is why in my opening, when I talked about mental health being something that really shouldn't be separate from how we think about our physical health, because there are so many parts of different mental health issues that are connected to what a person is developing in their brains, right? Your serotonin levels were not you don't produce serotonin levels at the same level that a typical average person does. And so how could you ever expect to be able to live a completely, balanced life from a mental health standpoint?
Right.
And so some of the things that medication does do, if you were diabetic, for example, you would take your insulin because you are not producing the appropriate level of insulin, right? And this is something necessary for you to stay alive.
Right.
And that is where, when we talk about issues like this, we're able to remove the stigma, right? That medication is something that makes me admit that I'm crazy. No. Medication is something that actually helps you because you as an individual may not be producing appropriate levels of serotonin and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a medical concern.
Yeah.
It's a medical issue. And when you can allow your mind to see it as a medical concern, not just a mental health concern, it is a mental health concern, but it also is a medical concern as well, because again, your body is not producing certain things. And so it gets disappointing when you're expecting different results when you're doing the same thing, but your body's not able to do different results because it's not capable of it from a chemical level, and so it is a medical consideration that we need to keep in our minds, and get past the fact that it's just only mental health. There's different levels of mental health. I'm speaking today right now on depression, anxiety, but there's a lot of different disorders that's in the DSM-5 that are considered mental health challenges that have more challenges related to it. Some are, more challenges, some are less challenging. I try to remind people that it doesn't matter what it might mean for you. We all experience pain differently. And so my pain is different than your pain.
Yeah.
We might have the same disorder, but I might experience it more severe than you, and vice versa. And so pain is different for everybody else. And so we do need to make sure that we're not linking somebody that we know that deals with depression and anxiety and saying, oh, well, I know they're all right. Why is this person?
That's good.
Everybody deals with pain differently. So you have to take that in context. So
we're all individually unique, right? And so the way that my body functions is going to be completely different from the way someone else's body functions. And we do have to take that into consideration, right? All of our medical care really should be individualized.
Yes.
So we just went through just this whole beautiful, honestly, journey that I'm sure did not feel beautiful at the time for you, but looking back and obviously knowing where you are today, truly is just one of those things that you could see, all of the ups and downs as you were describing your journey. I could just kind of flow with you as you were going through all of those ups and downs back then, and all of the bumps along the road. And you really did endure through quite a bit back then, right? And so talk to us a little bit about how your work has evolved and what led you to Well Theology Counseling Center.
Yeah, so, going through the personal journeys that I've been through, I realized that I had something unique about me that allowed me to help individuals who navigated similar things that I went through and I'm going through, to help them navigate it. But not just navigate it, but just be empowered about going through it. Just because of the way I personally went through mine. And so I started the journey towards the human service field, over 15 years ago, because there was just something personally inside of me that connected with this work. I remember, I think I shared this on one of the interviews we did before, but I remember my mom, who deals with mental health challenges, and I remember her telling me, you deal with what I go through. And that was like, whoo, you would have thought that the glass shattered when she said that, because I thought that what I was doing wasn't noticeable, or what I was experiencing wasn't noticeable. But that's the thing. The thing that you experience, others that experience the same thing can recognize it. And so, that's just one story. But when I would help her, just talking with her, and she would be like, man, you're better than my therapist. And then I heard that at other professions that I worked at, that was not related to human service field, they would say, well, why are you here? Like, you should be helping people. You should be a counselor, a pastor, they would say, and things like that. And I told myself, the more and more people said like the same thing. I was like, there's got to be some truth to it. And so I started my master's program in the professional counseling field because it was just something that I felt very strongly passionate about. And so I did that, and fast forward, now today, after working in the field, doing various type of things, all the way from case management to outpatient to intensive outpatient to working in a medication assisted treatment facility to now having my own business called Wealthyology Counseling Center. I just personally just been on this journey to be able to, impact one person at a time who's going through a mental health challenge like depression, like anxiety, like addiction, like personal growth and development, and just wanting to empower them, and doing it in a natural, relaxed way that they just feel comfortable being able to come to a person like me, because for one, I'm not going to judge them. Two, I have a understanding of pain and hurt and challenges and struggle, and that I can understand what they're going through. I can empathize. And then three, that I knew that there was a better version of me on the other side. And so that place of encouragement, that place of empowerment, is something that is very, alive and well in me. And I want to make sure that others can also experience that as well. So
I just want to hit on something that you just said, that you knew that there was a better version of you on the other side. And I think that for so many of us working in this space to try to empower people, working in social justice, working in health equity, there is something in us that recognizes that there is a better path for so many of us, so many members of our own community. There's a better version of life. Right. There's a better version that our communities should be existing in, right? There, and for you, it was, there's a better version of you from a mental health standpoint on the other side. Can you, so that's first and foremost incredible and incredibly powerful as a mindset for you to have as a therapist, as you are working with your clients who really are struggling to even see that. Because like you said earlier, sometimes when you're in the thick of it, all you think is that what you're experiencing today is what all of your tomorrows will be like. But that's not necessarily true. So can you just talk to us a little bit? And as much as I hate to admit it, we are almost at the close here. This has been such a great conversation. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you think it's important for you as a Black male to really have this sort of stake in the ground around mental health, and how has that shown up in the clients that you work with? Yeah,
so it's important for me personally, outside of being a Black man in general, like me personally, it's important for me to have a stake in the ground for mental health, but it just adds that extra bonus for being a Black male in this world because of the things that we experience. Black individuals in general, the challenges that we have come from, the day-to-day struggles that we endure currently, the policing of ourselves as we're walking down the street, monitoring ourselves, making sure that we're doing the right thing, things are in line, not saying the wrong thing, saying the right thing. There's so much mental gymnastics that we go through on a day-to-day basis that it's challenging. And so the stake in the ground for mental health for the Black community and being a male is important because I want to help individuals know that it is okay to talk about your mental health, to raise awareness about it, to bring it in conversations in the household, to ask questions of family members that you saw growing up that isolated themselves, that had addiction, that whatever it may be, like begin to ask questions now, begin to challenge the narrative or the lack of narrative that you experience in your household or around your peers. To not be one of those individuals like myself growing up that made fun of individuals who struggled and who was different or who possibly dealt with a mental health challenge. Because all of that just is going to affect you. All of that, those things that I was doing to somebody else, it just boxed me into a box for me, and it caused me to take so long to get my help. And so, again, you know, that is why I just want to make mental health the norm in conversation, because of the things that I know I went through and the things that I know I didn't have to go through had it been a conversation piece.
Yeah.
Had I had to help, you know,
Yeah.
earlier on. I like to believe that I wouldn't have took so long to get help. But I am a believer, though, in one's journey. You know, I know this is Journey to Equity. I'm a firm believer in one's journey, in that despite how you start off in the journey and what you go through, it doesn't mean that the journey will have to continue to be that end. You know, you're a passenger on this journey, and you can make a decision to say, okay, I want to accept that, or I don't want to accept that. I want to make a change. I want to do something different. I want to start a different trend, and I want to feel better. You have that ability. And again, for me, I try to help create a mindset in people that there's an other side of this. And so if you can have that belief system to start off with, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
For Well Theology is the belief that you can be well, right? If you can believe that you can be well, then everything else that follows is working towards that. And so for Well Theology, that is what I hope to do, is just create that belief system that you can be well.
That is beautiful. How could you not absolutely love Cassiel Smith? So, way to bring it full circle,
Yep.
you know, from your own experiences and the impact of it not being something that's talked about at home as you're growing up, the way that it was stigmatized for you, and into how that impacted your journey. And now you turning that completely on its head and full circle, making sure that you are empowering others, especially those in the Black community,
Yep.
to overcome these stigmatized ideals around mental health, and making sure everybody knows that they have the power to be well, which is what Well Theology stands for.
Yep.
Wow, thank you so much for being who
Thank
you
you.
are, and for you know, doing the work that you're doing. Before we leave, it's time for us to elevate you. That's the last part of our journey together.
All right.
So please tell us, what can we do as a community to elevate your work?
Yeah, so for one, just talk about it. Again, that whole mission of, you know, bringing this into the spaces, making it a norm, talk about it in the household, and ask questions of those that you might experience or might perceive to experience some challenges. You know, just be there for them. Secondly is that anytime you know somebody in the North Carolina area who is wanting mental health services, promote Well Theology counseling services. I can be found out on the website www.welltheology.com. I'm on social media, Well Theology. Just continue to promote it, and promote me as an individual as well, of somebody who's trusting, somebody who's supportive in the field, and not just myself. There's other individuals through Psychology Today, who's a counselor. You know, just anything related to the mental health space. Continuing to elevate that platform is going to be important.
Wow, we will certainly do that. Folks, y'all heard it. We need to talk about these issues, and we need to make sure that we know where to go to find the right resources for support. So follow Cassiel at Well Theology, and at Well Theology Counseling Center, www.welltheology.com. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
for
welcome.
joining us.
Thank you,
for
baby.
sharing your journey.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all so much for watching another episode of Our Journey to Equity. To find more, we have had quite a few episodes this year in our first season. You can find all of our journeyers on our website at www.ourjourneytoequity.com. You can also find us on Instagram, on our socials at Our Journey to Equity, and also all of the episodes are on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, bye.